The neon pulse of a tavern sign painted the deepening twilight, as Reese steered his dust-coated pickup to a halt outside the Wanderer's Rest, a humble watering hole tucked away off Route 19 in West Virginia. This place was no grand establishment, merely a reliable haven for the local crowd, long-haul drivers, and any traveler seeking a chilled glass and a moment's peace. Reese, home from his tour for only a week, craved nothing more than this quiet interlude before plunging back into the rhythm of civilian life. He nudged open the groaning door, and a wave of warm air, thick with conversation and the soulful thrum of a vintage jukebox, washed over him. His eyes swept the familiar scene, a pair of old-timers hunched over a pool table, a boisterous cluster of friends sharing a laugh at the bar, and solitary figures nursing their drinks in thoughtful silence. He hadn't come seeking company, only a space to unwind. He claimed a small table in the rear, a secluded spot that still offered a commanding view of the entire room. His dessert tan uniform seemed to melt into the dimly lit surroundings, the only contrast being the worn sneakers on his feet, a choice made for pure comfort over military correctness. Reese ordered a simple glass of water, sipping it slowly as his mind drifted homeward, to the family he would finally see after so many long months. The thought of his mother's home-cooked meals and the sound of his niece's bright laughter filled his senses. The heavy slam of the door shattered his peaceful reverie. A band of 6 men swaggered inside, their heavy-soled boots striking a hard rhythm on the worn floorboards. They were older, their weathered leather vests covered in patches and emblems that broadcast their shared history. As veterans, they moved with a loud confidence, their laughter and backslapping camaraderie echoing as they approached the bar. Reese gave them a brief, indifferent look before his attention returned to his water. But one of them did more than just glance back. Their apparent leader, a powerfully built man with a grizzled black and silver beard and intense, focused eyes, stopped cold in his tracks the moment he spotted Reese. He murmured something to his companions, and in an instant, all 6 of them turned their gazes upon him. The boisterous laughter died, replaced by a palpable tension that began to seep into the very air of the room. Reese felt the weight of their collective stare, but offered no reaction, no acknowledgement. He felt that kind of scrutiny before, a look that measured and judged a man without a single word. He took a slow sip of water, forcing his focus onto the jukebox melody, trying to ignore the disquiet that was now spreading like a ripple through the tavern. Over at the bar, the group drew into a tight huddle, their voices dropping to low, urgent whispers. The burly leader said something more, and another of the men let out a short, harsh laugh, shooting a pointed look directly at Reese. Reese maintained his outward calm, his body relaxed, but every one of his senses on high alert. He had learned, through years of hard-earned experience, how to remain perfectly still under pressure. Yet, the persistent weight of their judgment did not go unfelt. The evening, which had begun as a simple quest for solitude, was about to pivot in a direction Reese could never have foreseen. The melodic hum of the jukebox was suddenly crushed by the thunderous sound of boots, as the group of men began their deliberate march toward Reese's table. At their head was the formidable leader with the salt and pepper beard, his eyes fixed on Reese with the predatory intensity of a hawk about to strike. Reese sensed the shift in the room's atmosphere even before they arrived. The space, once alive with casual noise, fell into an unnerving quiet. The bartender froze with a bottle in his hand, and the regulars watched the approaching group with cautious apprehension. Reese carefully placed his glass on the table and shifted his weight back in his chair, his serene expression a perfect mask for the readiness that now coiled in his muscles. "Hey," the leader's voice was a low growl, rough and edged with contempt, as he stopped just short of the table. "That's some outfit you've got on. Where'd you pick it up?" "A costume shop." The men arrayed behind him snickered, a sound thick with derision. Reese lifted his gaze, his face a placid lake. He'd endured far worse insults than this. "It's mine," he stated, his voice perfectly even. "I earned it." A single eyebrow on the leader's face arched in mock astonishment. "Earned it, did you? That's rich. I've known my share of real soldiers, son, and not a single one of them wears running shoes with their fatigues. Are you playing dress-up hoping for a little pity? Or maybe a free round?" A muscle in Reese's jaw twitched, but his tone remained controlled. "I don't require pity or free drinks. I'm only here to have a quiet evening." The leader's mouth twisted into a sneer as he leaned forward, the stale scent of beer preceding him into Reese's personal space. "You don't look like any soldier I've ever seen," he hissed. "Where are your combat boots? Your dog tags? Hell, I bet you don't even know the right way to salute." One of his cronies chimed in. "Guarantee he couldn't tell you the first thing about boot camp," another added. "Probably never even seen a conflict zone." The group's laughter erupted once more, a grating sound that scraped against the quiet hum of the jukebox. Reese remained silent, his gaze shifting calmly from one man to the next. He wasn't afraid, but he had no intention of adding fuel to their fire. His time in the service had taught him the wisdom of choosing one's battles. Still, there was an ugliness to this confrontation that scraped at something deep inside him. It wasn't just their accusations, it was the sheer, unadulterated ignorance behind them. "I have nothing to prove to you," Reese said at last, his voice soft but unyielding. His composure seemed to irritate the leader, whose face darkened as he took another step closer, his large body casting a shadow over the table. "You think you're some kind of hero, don't you? Strolling in here like you own the place. Well, I don't think you belong." The entire tavern seemed to be holding its breath. Reese met the man's hostile glare without flinching. "I've completed 3 tours of duty overseas," he said, his voice still steady, but now carrying a new, harder edge. "And I don't need your permission to belong anywhere." The laughter ceased abruptly. The leader paused, his aggressive confidence momentarily shaken by the conviction in Reese's statement. But his pride was too stubborn to allow a retreat. He scoffed. "Yeah, prove it. Let's see your tags. Without him, you're just another liar." Reese's eyes quickly scanned the other men in the group, catching their flickering, uncertain glances. They were no longer so sure of their leader's righteous crusade, but none of them had the courage to intervene. He let out a slow, deliberate breath, fighting the instinct to let this escalate. "I don't owe you any proof," he stated. "But if you believe causing a scene in here is a wise move, I suggest you reconsider." The tension in the air was now a physical thing. The bartender's hand drifted toward the phone, ready to summon help. Other patrons began to squirm in their seats, their eyes nervously flicking between Reese and the hostile group. And yet, the leader held his ground. His smirk returned, sharper and more venomous than before. "You've got a quick tongue," he said, his voice a low, threatening rumble. "Let's find out if your hands are just as fast." The threat hung there, stretching the moment thin, like a wire pulled to its breaking point. The leader's sneer deepened as he lunged, his hand shooting out to grab the collar of Reese's uniform. His attack was clumsy, fueled by ego rather than expertise. But it was the spark that ignited everything. Reese didn't have time to think. He simply moved. Years of relentless training took over. With a single, fluid motion, he pivoted away from the grab, intercepting the man's wrist in midair. In the same seamless sequence, Reese twisted the arm up behind the man's back, using his own momentum to drive him forward and pin him, face down, against the hard edge of the table. The leader let out a choked cry of pain and surprise, his blustering facade instantly shattering. The tavern erupted with shocked gasps and frantic whispers as the other bikers froze in place, their eyes wide with disbelief, locked on their now helpless leader. For a heartbeat, the room was perfectly still. Reese's voice sliced through the stunned silence, quiet and controlled, yet ringing with absolute authority. "I told you to think twice." He applied a fraction more pressure, his grip relentlessly firm but measured. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." The leader struggled futilely against Reese's hold, but it was useless. The soldier's calm precision offered no weakness, no possibility of escape. From the other side of the room, one of the bikers took a tentative step forward, his hands raised in a weak gesture of peace. "Hey, buddy," he stammered, "just let him go. He didn't mean anything." Reese's eyes lifted, his gaze locking with the man's. "He came at me. You all saw it." His voice was as steady as stone, unruffled by the sudden chaos. "If you want him released, tell him to calm down." The bartender, who had been watching silently with the phone still in his hand, finally found his voice. "Maybe it's time for all of you to go before this gets any uglier." But the leader, whom one of his friends called Gideon, wasn't quite ready to concede. Even with his arm contorted and his face pressed against the sticky tabletop, he snarled through clenched teeth, "Call the police. This guy just attacked me. He's a fraud in a stolen uniform, and I want him arrested." Reese released him with a controlled push, and Gideon staggered away, cradling his arm as he spun around to glare at the soldier. "You're going to pay for this," he seethed, his voice dripping with venom. The other bikers, emboldened now that their leader was free, quickly closed ranks behind him. One of them fumbled for his phone, his hands trembling as he dialed 911. "Yeah, we need help," he said, his voice loud enough for the entire bar to hear. "There's a guy here impersonating a soldier, and he just assaulted my friend." Reese remained motionless, his expression unreadable, though his mind was working quickly. He understood how this situation appeared, how easily it could spiral into something much worse. But he also knew, with unwavering certainty, that he was in the right. His years of service, the sacrifices he had made, everything he represented, it would all stand firm against their baseless claims. He just had to maintain his composure. The bar was now buzzing with low conversations as patrons whispered to one another, shooting sideways glances at Reese. Some looked worried, while others seemed to hold a quiet admiration for how effortlessly he had diffused the physical threat. But no one stepped up to dispute what had just occurred. Outside, the approaching wail of sirens sliced through the night, growing louder with each passing second. Flashing red and blue lights strobed against the tavern windows, throwing chaotic, dancing shadows across the room. The police were here. The doors swung wide and officers entered. One a powerfully built man with a severe, military-style haircut, his eyes hidden behind reflective sunglasses. His partner was a woman with sharp, intelligent features and a watchful, composed air. Their arrival instantly quelled the noise in the room, as every eye turned to face them. "We received a call about a disturbance," the male officer announced, his voice steady and authoritative. "Can someone tell me what happened?" Gideon, still rubbing his wrist and flushed with anger, was the first to speak. He jabbed a trembling finger toward Reese. "That man attacked me, and he's faking being a soldier. Just look at him. He's not even wearing proper boots." The officer's gaze shifted to Reese, who stood calmly beside his table, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. "Is that correct?" the officer asked, his tone carefully neutral. Reese shook his head slowly, meeting the officer's gaze directly. "No, sir. This man and his friends accosted me because they refused to believe I'm actually in the service. When he attempted to assault me, I defended myself." The female officer stepped forward, her sharp eyes methodically scanning the faces in the room. "Did anyone else witness this incident?" she asked, her voice calm but commanding. The bartender finally spoke up, his words cutting through the tense quiet. "I saw the whole thing." Gideon made the first move. The soldier was just protecting himself. It wasn't an assault. A low murmur of consensus rippled through the patrons. A man near the jukebox added, "That's right, he didn't start a thing. Gideon's been spoiling for a fight since he walked in." The male officer turned his attention back to Reese. "Do you have any identification to verify your service, sir?" Reese nodded, his movements slow and deliberate as he gestured to the duffel bag resting on the floor beside his table. "In that bag, you'll find my dress uniform with my name and rank. My military ID and wallet are in there as well. You're welcome to check." The officer retrieved the bag, opened it, and carefully removed the neatly folded uniform, its surface adorned with ribbons and insignia. He examined it for a moment before looking at his partner, who gave a slight, confirming nod. "You're all clear," the male officer said to Reese, his voice now firm but respectful. "We appreciate your cooperation." Gideon, his bruised ego still stinging, growled, "You're just going to believe him. He could have faked all of that." The female officer fixed Gideon with a piercing glare. "That's enough. From what we've gathered, you initiated this conflict, and you're fortunate he isn't pressing assault charges against you." The words struck Gideon like a physical blow, and his aggressive posture finally deflated. The other bikers shifted their weight uncomfortably, studiously avoiding eye contact with everyone. "Here is what's going to happen," the male officer continued. "We are filing an official report on this incident. If you wish to pursue this claim, you are free to do so, but be aware that filing a false report is a serious offense." Gideon opened his mouth to argue, then shut it, finally recognizing he had no ground to stand on. The officers took a step back, their eyes sweeping the room one final time as the tension at last began to dissipate. The female officer turned back to Reese. "Thank you for maintaining your composure. We'll ensure this is all documented accurately." Reese offered her a small, grateful nod, his calm demeanor unbroken. "Thank you, officer." The bikers began to shuffle awkwardly toward the exit, their earlier swagger replaced by a sheepish silence. Gideon, still radiating resentment, shot one last hateful look at Reese before vanishing out the door. The officers departed soon after, leaving the tavern to slowly reclaim its normal, conversational hum. Reese sat back down, his glass of water still untouched. The weight of the encounter hadn't fully lifted, but a wave of relief washed over him that it hadn't escalated even further. Around him, the other patrons were still whispering, stealing glances in his direction. Their initial apprehension now transformed into a quiet, profound respect. A few days later, Reese was under the hood of his old pickup, which was parked in the driveway of his modest house on the edge of Oak Haven, West Virginia. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the lawn as he meticulously tightened a bolt. The memory of the tavern confrontation still lingered, not because of the physical threat he had faced far deadlier situations overseas, but because of what it signified. It wasn't the first time he had been judged on sight, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. The sound of gravel crunching under tires pulled him from his thoughts. He straightened up, wiping grease from his hands with a rag as he turned to see a motorcycle coasting into his driveway. The rider was one of the men from the bar, a slender man with receding hair and a leather jacket that seemed a size too large. Reese recognized him as Leo, one of Gideon's crew. Leo killed the engine, dismounted, and took off his helmet, pausing for a moment before he cautiously approached. His body language was tentative, almost apologetic, like someone nearing a wary animal they didn't want to frighten. "Reese, right?" Leo asked. His voice low. Reese simply nodded, saying nothing, waiting to see what would come next. Leo cleared his throat, jamming his hands deep into his jacket pockets. I just wanted to come by and say I'm sorry about what went down at the bar." Reese raised an eyebrow, surprised but still wary. "You were right there with him," he stated flatly. Leo nodded, his face coloring with shame. "I know. I didn't try to stop it, and I should have. Gideon, he has a way of getting people stirred up, and I just went with it. But that's no excuse. I've been turning it over in my head ever since, and I needed to come tell you that." Reese watched Leo for a long moment. The man's unease was palpable, but his sincerity seemed just as real. "Why come here now?" Reese asked, his tone even. Leo shrugged, his gaze dropping to his worn boots. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because, well, seeing how you handled yourself, it really made me see how wrong we were. You didn't deserve any of that." For a stretch of silence, Reese just leaned against his truck, crossing his arms over his chest. "What are you looking for, Leo?" "Forgiveness." Leo looked up, his eyes filled with a raw earnestness. "Maybe. But more than that, I want to do better. I've seen enough hate in my time, and I don't want to be a part of it anymore. What we did was wrong, and I have to take responsibility for my part." Reese's stern expression softened almost imperceptibly. He had received apologies before, some heartfelt, some empty. This one felt different, not just for the words spoken, but for the sheer effort it must have taken Leo to show up on his doorstep. "I appreciate you coming all this way," Reese said at last. "It doesn't change what happened, but it's a start." Leo nodded, a visible wave of relief washing over his features. "Thanks, man, I really mean that." As Leo swung his leg over his bike and fired up the engine, Reese watched him right away, a complex mixture of emotions swirling within him. The incident at the tavern had been a harsh reminder of the quiet prejudices that still existed. But Leo's apology was an unexpected glimmer of hope, a small but significant gesture toward something better. Reese turned back to the engine of his truck, wiping his hands again as he processed the events of the last few days. He knew the battle against ignorance was far from over, but he also knew that he wasn't fighting it entirely alone. The choices he made, the quiet dignity with which he carried himself, these things could, perhaps, change minds, one person at a time. The evening air settled around him, calm and quiet save for the distant, rhythmic hum of cicadas. Reese felt a deep sense of resolve settle over him, not just to persevere, but to continue to face the world with the same unwavering strength and integrity that had seen him through the worst of war. Sometimes the most important battles weren't fought on foreign soil. Sometimes they were fought right here at home in taverns, in driveways, and in the hearts of men. And as far as Reese was concerned, those battles were every bit as important.